Hello and welcome back. In this lecture we're going to talk about static and final keywords. Here I am in Eclipse and I have my main program right here. I'm going to start by creating another class and I'll name it student. I'm going to give this class two variables of type string and I'm going to give it another variable again of type string and I'm going to call it student class. In fact, I'm going to make this variable static and we're going to take a look of the differences of this variable and this variable. And in my main program I'm going to declare two objects. I'm going to say student1 equals to new student, and student2 equals to new student. Now each of our objects has a copy of our string variable name. So if I say student1 dot name equals to Steven and student2 dot name equals to Daniel, and of course I can display them with a sysout statement. Sysout control space student1 dot name and sysout control space student2 dot name, and of course if I run this it's gonna say Steven and Daniel. And the difference from our static variable right here is that each object does not get its own copy. Static member variables, also known as class variables, belong to a class and exists only one copy of this variable because there is only one class. And to access this variable I should type the name of the class dot and then the name of the static variable, that is student class. And I'm gonna give it a value. Let's say that the student class is Web Development Fundamentals, and I can display this one the same way as the non-static variables. Sysout control space student class. So non-static variables are also known as instance variables because each object gets its own copy, and static variables are also known as class variables. So if I run this, I have my Web Development Fundamentals class right here and of course the student names below. And let's see a difference between static and non-static methods as well. So if I say here public, I'm gonna say student name, and right here I'm just gonna print the student name. I'm gonna say here name, and I'm gonna replace my sysout statement with a call to this method. I'm gonna say student1 dot student name and student2 dot student name. I'm gonna add the return type of this method, which will be void. So if I run this, the results are gonna be the same as before. So we have the name of the class and then the student names. So I'm just calling this method to output the name of the students. So if I add the static method right here, I can access it via class. So let's say public static class info. I'm gonna add the return type as well. I'm just gonna put the sysout statement right here. So to access this method, I have to use the name of the class, in this case student, dot, and then I'm gonna add the name of the static method. class info. So if I run the program now, it displays Java right here. So I'm accessing the data of class info by calling first the name of the class, then the name of the static method. Well, there is something to keep in mind when we're talking about static variables and static methods. One thing you should remember is that static methods can access static variables because they both belong to class. So if I say here student class, it's going to show the value of our static variable right here, which is web development fundamentals. However, a static method cannot access instance variables. So for example, if we say sysout, control space, and we say here name, it's going to give us an error that says cannot make a static reference to the non-static field name. Which makes sense because the static data exists before making any object of the class. So it doesn't know about the value that we've given to the instance variables through objects. So I'm going to comment this out and I'm going to say this gives you an error. And on the other hand, non-static methods can access static data. So if I say here sysout, this as well makes sense because by the time that we've got the objects, of course, we've already got the class. And the methods that are linked to objects, of course, can access the class data. And I'm going to add here the non-static variable as well. I'm going to say name plus is enrolled in plus student class. And I'm going to add some space in here. And to make it less confusing, I should delete this system out println statement right here. So if I run this, it's going to say Steven is enrolled in Web Development Fundamentals and Daniel as well is enrolled in Web Development Fundamentals. So don't forget that non-static methods can access static data. So you might be wondering when you would use the static data. And a typical example of static data is, for example, if we print out a value from a math class. For example, if we print out the value e and run this. So math is a class created by Java, and this class contains, for example, this e constant or the p constant, which we can use for our math equations. And let's see what we mean by a constant. So by constant, we mean that we cannot change the value of that particular variable. So if I say here math.e equals to 4, it will give us an error saying that the final field math.e cannot be assigned. So this means that this is unchangeable. Once it's created, you will not be able to change it. If we want to create our own constant, we can do something like this. So a convention in Java is that the constant variables are represented by uppercase letters. I'll create one right here. I'll say public static final. I'm gonna make it of type int, and right here I'm gonna say my, just to make it more readable, I'm gonna add an underscore right here, constant. And the keyword final right here makes this variable unchangeable. So once we've given this variable a value, we cannot change it. So when you have a final field, you have to assign it a value in the same line that you've created it. So I'm gonna say here 8. If we want to display our constant, our field is static, so it belongs to class. So first we should mention the class student.myConstant and then the name of the field. And now if we run this, it's gonna display our constant, which has the value 8. And this constant can be int, string, double, or any Java type. It doesn't have to be int. Now another use of static fields is counting the objects that you create. So for example, if we add here public static int count and we give it a 0 value, and here we will also add the constructor, and remember that there is no return type for the constructor. So this constructor is run every time we create an object. And here I'm gonna increment count. So count is a static field, which means it belongs to the class. We said that there is only one copy of the static variable, so that copy will be shared through all the objects. And if I want to display the count, I'll say right here sysout control space. I'll say before creating objects plus, and I'm gonna add our count variable, and I'm gonna copy the statement and I'm gonna paste it after creating the objects. So if I run this, it's gonna say before creating objects the count is 0, and after creating the objects the count is 2, because there are 2 objects. So counting is a very common use of static variables. So these are static and final data. If you've never seen them before, I know there is a lot of information at once, but of course you should practice them, and once you've practiced them, it's all gonna make sense. So I'm gonna leave this code in the resources section in case you want to play around with it and change the data, change the names of the methods and the variables, and try them yourself. It's a good way to understand them. So I'm gonna leave this lecture right here and follow me through following lectures to continue learning some other interesting Java stuff. See you there.